आप लोग सब खड़े हो, यही बता के मैं अपनी बात को समाप्त करूंगी। धन्यवाद।
माननीय सदस्य श्री संजय सिंह, संजय सिंह नॉट प्रेजेंट। डॉक्टर अमर पटनायक।
Thank you, Chairperson, ma'am.
कितना मिनट है इनका?
Ma'am, I don't have the luxury of rhetoric, even if I wanted to, due to paucity of time. But I would say that right to health is already a fundamental right. It's already an inalienable right, and this has been pronounced by the Honorable Supreme Court as late as July 2020. And it has said that the duty of the state to ensure the right to health. So when I look at this private member bill saying that this bill to provide for health as a fundamental right to all citizens, I think that health for all or universal health coverage has already been read into Article 21, and therefore to have a separate right to health bill 2021 to me makes really no sense. Now I'll come to another structural defect in the bill, I thought, and that is the bill at section 5, clause 5, mentions right to food, right to water, right to sanitation, right to therapy, right to healthcare services, right to road safety, right to occupational safety, protection. Now everything is already covered under separate legislations. Bringing in more legislation, more act provisions will not really solve the problem. The problem, which I completely agree with the sentiments expressed on both the sides, is that health is an issue in this country. Health has remained to be an issue since independence, and that is because the resources available in this country for generating this kind of health infrastructure, both physical and human resources, has not been available. No one can deny the fact that the life expectancy since independence has climbed up from 33, 35 to 73, 75. It has been possible only because every government has created health infrastructure. But at the same time, at a time when we are discussing this, the 15th Finance Commission says that the ratio of, I don't really agree with my friend Rakesh Sinha ji, because the 15th Finance Commission's figure is, as per WHO's recommendation, 1 doctor per 1,000 people. India currently has 1 for every 1,511 people. So we are way off the mark, and if I go to specialists, I think it is far worse. If we look at the nurse to population ratio, it is 1 to 670, whereas the WHO norm is 1:300. I can go on and on. The most important fact is, even till now, the out-of-pocket expenses for a household in India going towards health expenditure is about 54%, very, very high. And therefore, there is a need for universal health coverage and health for all. In fact, ma'am, I just recently attended a global conference of parliamentary unions, and there health for all was expressed as the aspiration of every global citizen, not just Indian citizen. And this has become accentuated by the fact that post-pandemic, people have realized that no one is safe until everyone is safe. And therefore, when I say that we have to ensure fundamental right or right to health, we have to ensure that this infrastructure is first of all available. Now, how to meet this? There has been a suggestion in this bill that it will be through central legislation, whereas the state is whereas health is a state subject. I will not get into the fact of whether it can be legislated centrally, because right to education is a state subject, but right to education bill has been passed by the center, enabling the states to make separate rules and spend money. But what is important, that the health expenditure that we do is only 1.5 to 1.7% even after 75 years. Whereas the WHO norm is 2.5% of your GDP, and our own national health policy is 2.5% of GDP. And I think that is a matter of concern. The concern is, where will the states get the money from? Where will the states' resources will come from? But then I must say that despite resource constraints, I would like to take the case of Orissa. In Orissa, we have the Biju Swasthya Kalyan Yojana, which has been made into a scheme by Honorable Chief Minister Naveen Patnaik. We are not subscribing to the Ayushman Bharat because our scheme ensures health for all in true sense. Every APL, BPL family, whether outdoor patient or indoor patient, can walk into a government hospital and will get all kinds of treatment free of cost. And if he has to get service from outside the state, there are 200 hospitals which have been empaneled. That is the ideal model, I would say, but it requires resources. Not all the states could probably afford it. But I think this is where the center should move from an insurance model to a rights-based health model where every citizen of India can walk into a hospital and get free medical treatment, both indoor as well as outdoor. Mind you, Ayushman is only for indoor healthcare services, not for outdoor services. Now I'll come to a very salient point, madam, and this is relating to the fact that Manojji spoke about figures relating to the National Family Health Survey. I talked about life expectancy. Now about the pandemic. Now if you look at the pandemic, it overwhelmed the health infrastructure of advanced countries too. We cannot, no country can, provide for reserves or a redundant health infrastructure to such an extent that it can meet any pandemic. But what it can do, what all of us can do, what the India can do is to be prepared for it. Follow the disaster preparedness model that we have already shown. In Orissa, we have done it. Follow a pandemic preparedness model. The whole world, currently the IMF, the World Bank, and the WHO are talking about pandemic treaty, pandemic preparedness treaty. And when you talk about pandemic preparedness, we will naturally be looking into both the human infrastructure as well as the physical infrastructure. Ma'am, our emphasis in policy has always been on outputs, not on outcomes. And that is the biggest bane. When we are talking about setting up hospitals, we say we have set up hospitals without doctors. We have set up hospitals without paramedic staff. We have set up hospitals without nurses. Now that is why it is important to emphasize only on outcomes. Let outcomes be the criteria of all our policies, particularly health and education, of course. Now another point which I will talk about is the responsibility or the ownership that the community can take in health-related matters. We have seen during the pandemic that community rose to the occasion. Women's self-help groups rose to the occasion in states like Orissa to communicate ideas relating to prevention and preparedness of the pandemic, of the first wave of the pandemic. And that is most important, the preparedness aspect. And therefore, I harp on a pandemic treaty, or I harp on a preparedness, a global or a health preparedness legislation, or not legislation, health preparedness scheme. If you emphasize on preparedness, I'm sure everything will be taken care of. Lastly, while talking about the bill, I do not want to use the word, but this is an umbrella legislation for which separate legislations already exist. There is no point having another act when the basic thing of supply and distribution is not addressed. You have to supply and not even stop at that. You have to distribute those. Now, unless both these things happen, and which can only happen, which has happened over a period of time so far, it is not that it has not happened in last 75 years, but what has happened is at a very slow pace. We need to move on. We need to move very fast because health, as I said, is already accepted as an inalienable fundamental right of every Indian citizen. Thank you, madam.
Okay. Dr. K. Kesav.